I do not know everyone in this audience. There are approximately 1,000 people in this room. If you're in this room today, I don't know you personally, but I know this about you. And I can say this with absolute certainty. If you're in this room, you are the person in your family, in your workplace, in your circle of friends. You are the person that other people have always thought is a little bit different. Is that true? Yeah. Not bad, not bad. Just different. Because you look at things differently. You have a different way of seeing the world. And we laugh at that sometimes. On the one hand. But I also know this. I know that when your family and the people in your workplace and your circle of friends, when their lives fall apart, when their marriage, their perfect marriage ends in a day, and when their career falls apart, and when their health fails, that you're the one that they come to. They come to you and they say, "What happened? What happened to my life?" Because you have the courage to see the world in a different way. You have the strength to live your life in a different way. And this is very, very important, and this is why we're here today.
Not all of you will be motivated toward all of the things that we have to speak about. You decide what's best for you. And let me give you just a little hint how to go about it. As a trained intelligence officer, my wife often says, "Bo, you're so gullible. You just believe anything that anybody says." As a trained intelligence officer, my arms are out. I want to get my arms around all of the information that is available. But now doesn't mean that I am naive. Once I've got my arms around all the information that's available, then I begin a very careful process of verifying every shred of that information. And those things that I can verify as true, I hold to. Because in the end, no matter what the media does or anything else, truth and reality will bear out. And the rest of it I discard. So I invite you, I'm going to give you a lot of information. I invite you to get your arms around it, and then you check any of it you want to, because the information I'm giving you is information I have already verified.
E.O. Wilson says this beautifully. He says the world from this point forward is going to be run by synthesizers. People that can take a lot of information from a lot of different places and make the right decisions at the right time and think critically about it. So it's no longer enough to be an expert in one field, because the world doesn't know those boundaries. But we're being asked to draw from everything that we know and to synergize it in a way that we've never done before. So as the world changes in ways that we're not used to, faster than we've ever seen, our lives are changing as well. And we're all learning together. And this is where I think the synergy of the ancient and the indigenous wisdom, married with the best science of today, through community resilience, is the key to bring us full circle.
To gain that sort of perspective, that insight, that pattern recognition, which is essential, which ultimately is using the two halves of the brain instead of just one side, and what I've often referred to in other works as symbol literacy. But never forgetting, you see, that this is ultimately an occult subject matter. Because actually, you know, I'm not an expert in anything. I don't hold any credentials from any university. You know, I haven't invented a semiconductor or put man on the moon or anything like that. So you can all relax, because there's no such thing as a final word on any of this. We are here to discover and investigate together, to look at a very fascinating subject that is very much part of our own spiritual journey. I said in Bath, I talked 2 weeks ago in Bath, and I said there that this is certainly not infotainment, and it's not even food for the brain. That's not what this is about, my work. That might be true for other people, but it's not true for me. This is ultimately about one's own spiritual development. You're here to discover who you are. And I believe this kind of information is, essential to that process of self-discovery. That's what it's ultimately all about. Not egohood, but selfhood. And therefore, that's a journey which we're all taking. And on that type of journey, we should be open-minded. We should have the bravery to make mistakes, because mistakes are very healthy. Mistakes are good. And it keeps us humble to realize that we are evolving, and no one person's perspective, right? I said this is about gaining perspective. Well, really, no one person's perspective is the same as another. So I'm not a collectivist, and I'm not asserting any point of view. We're discovering together a fascinating subject, always bearing in mind that it is occult. And that means that you have to adjust your settings. It's not normal, it's not official, it's controversial. And it also means that it's a process, it's a journey of awakening, a journey of discovery. It's not declarative.
That's what Vern says. It's just feeding on its own pathology. It's just perpetuating the pathology.
And yes, and deep down inside, people know, they know something's wrong. They have an essence. They suspect certain things, but having no other reference point, they're not willing to make that little leap. They shouldn't be afraid to make that leap. They are the path, They have more in common than they suspect. Consciousness is the name of the game, not politics.
Well, then what's stopping people? A lot of people aren't being stopped, and the paradigm shift is,
Because they have fear. They're basically culturally conditioned, and
well, by the name of your book, you would assume that you believe that we have a little help in maintaining fear, having a little encouragement from outside.
Yes, from part of the negative structure, yes.
Perpetrating itself just in its own dynamics?
Yes, I mean, they're trying to cause as many unaligned people to align themselves in that direction, to supply more energy to that resonance, as it were. But that resonance is self-defeating.
Is it a conscious situation on their part, or is it just part of the dynamics of that mindset?
It's a perfectly conscious situation on their part.
Mm-hmm.
And, you really have to understand what the positive-negative hierarchy thing is all about. And a good friend of mine, Michael Topper, wrote some very good material on it, and that's in Matrix 3, too. And you really need to understand what that's about, what the idea of positive and negative conceptually is about, while you're viewing everything dualistically, in order to really understand what unity means.
I'm born in LA, and I've just been here my entire life. Why did I incarnate here in Los Angeles?
You didn't incarnate there on purpose, I can tell you that you were brought there by the sacred geometry system to make sure that you didn't connect to ancestors or advanced personalities that would lead you into a colonial life right at your birth. If you had, your life would be very, very different. You would have been a master ancestral communicator by the time you were 7. By the time you were 13 or 14, you would have been a master astral communicator, both living and dead. By the time you were 15 or 16, you would have been part of a dreamtime society in which you lived many dreaming worlds simultaneously. Because that's your purpose this lifetime, is to be a multidimensional, multifunctional being of light in all dimensions and time streams, connected as an I am presence, and not disconnected in this world of separation. You're a divinity path being, and that means you have a divinity path life ahead of you when you accept it into your sovereign soul.
I've been accepting it more, that's for sure.
I'm going to let you in on a little something. In 20 years of doing this, I've only met maybe 13 divinity path souls this lifetime. That's how rare they are. I've never had an actual divinity path living soul as the I am presence on a radio show either. And when I saw you send your little thing in and I read it and I'm like, divinity path soul, I had been literally waiting for this 20 years for one to come on air in awareness or unawareness of how incredible the lifetime that you could have if you can just break through the barrier of the fraud belief system you've inherited and see that there's a whole new belief system that your light body frequency has that's willing to co-create with you a way to deprogram this fraud reality. So abundance is here, and it's never going to be a fraud reality again for you.
Well, there's two factors for the evolution. I'll just say it very quickly. Two factors. Number one, we are not victims of our health. 90-some% of ill health on this planet is now found to due totally to stress. It is not due to the biological malfunctioning. That in fact less than 5% of the population can even legitimately claim that their genetics are interfering with their life. So that means 95% of the people have a perfectly adequate genetic system, okay? We've been programmed to be victims, and the fact is, no, we are the ones that change the environment or perception of the environment. And since the environment that controls the cells, it doesn't make a difference if the cell's in a plastic dish or a skin-covered dish. It still responds to the environment. Our mind creates the chemistry, which is the foundation of the culture medium called blood. Your thoughts release different chemicals into the blood, and just as I change the culture medium in one dish to another dish, I change the fate of the cells. As you change your mind and change your perception, you change your own biology and genetics, which means you're all powerful, but you don't believe it because there's nobody supportive. This becomes really critical, and the other part is this: we've all been programmed. And this is the hardship that we face, and there's a movie called The Matrix. You may have seen people look for it in the science fiction part of the video store. It's actually a documentary. and the reason is simply this: we have been given the choice of take the blue pill and go back into the program, or take the red pill and get out of the program. They never really said what would happen if you got out of the program, and all of us have been programmed last trimester of pregnancy, first 7 years, is download. And the reason for the download is this: you cannot be conscious if you don't have data. In other words, I buy you a new iPod, you take it out of the box, I say push play, play is to create the playlist, created, conscious, let's say. I say push play on the new iPod, and nothing happens. So, well, why not? And the answer is you didn't put any programs to play from. First 7 years, nature designed the download. The download is a brain state of theta as a predominant brain state, which is hypnosis, so that children observe everyone around them and download the behavior without conscious filtering or conscious interpretation. It's just a recording. What their fathers, their mothers, their family, culture is doing is a download. And these then become the foundation of the database. Now, the issue is the conscious mind is us, our spiritual, our source, who we are. We are in the conscious mind. There's an entity in there. That's us, okay? And the conscious mind is the creative mind. The conscious mind has wishes, desires, and aspirations. The subconscious mind is the habitual mind. It just plays the programs that we got. Well, the issue is, why don't our lives match our wishes and our desires? And science has answered that simply by the fact that it recognizes that we only operate 5% of the time from our conscious minds. That means 95% of your life is coming from the subconscious programs, which means the behaviors that you represent 95% of the time are actually not even yours. Fundamentally, they were downloaded from other people. And as a result, we're not living the lives that we want to live.
This is a typical variations in some of the patterns that we've now discovered, that the brain is really like a fluid. It's changing with the electromagnetic fields of Schumann's resonance. I'm going to suggest a second thing that we have not yet discussed that I'm ready to write nexus on, called microtubule. It was used originally when I worked in anesthesiology at the University of Washington. That was my cover where I worked. They stuck us in anesthesiology, and that's where we started our works. And the lab next to mine had the monkey with the chips in its head, and the lab on the other side was doing ketamine, telepathine, and BZ studies. I'm not even going to talk to you about what I was doing. My wife has written a book called, a paper called I Married the Wizard of Oz, where she runs down some of the work she saw me do in Army intelligence. And she's now doing some follow-up research with Dr. Carl Schleicher, MRU, and some of the people I associated with. And stay tuned on that. That'll be a real interesting thing, because I didn't even know who I was working for. You know, I'm as curious to find out what she discovers as you might be. When they used people like me, they never gave us full disclosure. Even when we were at the top end of the pyramid, we never had a clue what was really going on. And so and there were a number of us, Bearden, others that you've probably heard of. We were all part of a team, if you will, with the advances in concepts. We were like 20 and 30 years ahead of what's being published right now. And what I'm trying to do is I'm being brought out of retirement to end my years with my swan songs of going back to the physics that I used to do. Unfortunately, I don't have the toys I used to, so I will call myself an armchair physicist now. I'm not a physicist with big toys like atom smashers and, you know, the big toys. But I have access to people that are, and so we're doing some interesting research on how the brain really works.
I had contact with an agent, CIA agent actually, and I asked him, I said, well, why isn't this material, mathematics and everything I was finding at that time taught in universities? And he just smiled at me quietly and said, it is. But it's only taught to selected students. They actually pick out the brilliant students. They sign the Secrecy Act and then they're fed into the system.
The microtubule in the body is a new circulatory system that we used to try to model how acupuncture works. We did the original studies under President Nixon. We brought in Dr. Chu from China, barefoot doctor himself, and we started doing studies on how acupuncture actually works. And what we found was that it was a surface phenomena, and I'm going to suggest on a new paper that I've just seen from Hammeroff and some others on what's called a liquid crystal microtubule. That is almost a conflict of definitions in terms of how these liquid crystals form into physical cavities for resonant cavity oscillators. It's all about resonance and frequency bands that are going on. It turns out you're dialoguing with the universe and creating the reality around you. It's not real. This is not real. The only thing that's really real is in your mind's eye, what we call eidetic imaging. That is the only thing that's real, and you can change that. It's almost impossible because of your belief systems and the way you were raised and the traumas that you went through. But there's ways to reprogram that.
Okay, well, it might interest you to know, ladies and gentlemen, that the human acupuncture meridians and acupuncture points are receptive points for this cosmic energy. And there's acupuncture points on plants, there's acupuncture points on animals, and there's acupuncture points all over the planet. And the largest energy vortexes are right where your major cities are. New York, Los Angeles, almost every major city in the world. London is sitting right on top of what the Hindus call a chakra, which feeds energy into the Earth's acupuncture or meridian system. Okay? Mess with the Earth and you mess with everything it grows, because we're all physically emanations of the Earth. The Earth is our mother. Mess with mama, you mess with yourself. Your acupuncture system does exactly what's going on here in the plant. Everything I've just talked about is in you, completely. Everything. You screw it up, you screw it up.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite, that we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
How many people in this room believe that you have a power within your body that is not fully used? How many believe that? Okay, how many believe that the power is there first? Do you believe the power is there? Okay, my question, why don't you use it? Why aren't we using that power? There's a reason why. And that reason is what we're here to do today.
There's something fishy about this, and I want the lowdown. Now come clean. Where did I come from?
Well, you see, son, it was like this. Once upon a time, there existed on Earth a high culture whose people were filled with the Spirit and knew all the mysteries of creation. These secrets of creation were revealed to them because they lived in harmony with the laws. When human beings choose to live in wholeness and in harmony with the purpose of their spirit and soul, this choice opens the doors to a higher perception, and the universal spirit offers the truth of life through divine inspiration. The result is global enlightenment, and civilization develops. The human race living at that time possessed the universal understanding that the planet is a biological living being, and that the planet is a body and its people the cells of that body. People knew neither ownership nor egoism, and they kept their planetary body, the Earth, clean, because they knew that they only had one Earth in common. They could neither sell nor divide it, nor were they allowed to market its water, air, or resources. Everybody had everything they needed. There was no class distinction. There were neither rich nor poor people. They gave to each other and lived in abundance. The living cosmic laws of brotherhood replaced the dogmatic religions and laws. People did not know labor. Rather, they contributed joyfully to the community with their personal achievements. Each individual's talents were encouraged. The understanding of both the inner spiritual worlds and the material outer worlds enabled the archetypes, the risen masters of wisdom, to live amongst humans and to teach them the great mysteries and initiation steps of the temple.
The significance of 12 years of emotional body training is that is exactly what they were doing in ancient Egypt. There was a 12-year school, a 12-year Egyptian mystery school, if you will, that focused on emotional body clearing. The training was called the left eye of Horus. The left eye because the left eye is controlled by the right brain. It's the side of the mind or the brain that sees life intuitively. This is what was going on in Egypt. And I had had 12 years exactly of emotional body training when the missing information began to, like I say, magically appear to me. So I was recreating unknowingly what was going on in ancient Egypt. There's 12 temples, 12 major temples in Egypt along the Nile. The initiate would spend about a year in each of these temples, learning how to move through fears and limitations associated with each of the 12 major chakras. There's one specific training that the initiate would go through in the left eye of Horus training in the temple known as Kamumbu. The initiate would stand in front. There would be a wall right in front of him, and then there would be 3 steps leading down into water, and it was dark. They couldn't see any further than the 3 steps. So the initiate was told only one thing, that is to go into the water and to find a different way to come out. That's all they were told. It was, again, dark, and it was deep. It was about 25 feet deep. After they carefully went through and came into an opening, they could see that there was a tank now that was lit. when they got into this tank, they also saw that they had company. There were crocodiles in that tank. And remember, the instructions are to find a different way out. Well, looking through the crocodiles, what they could see is that up at the top here, there was a way out. When they came to the top, they were told by the instructor, oh, by the way, you just failed. That was not the way out. So failure meant that they had to go through a lot more training. Then when it was thought, after much more training, that they were ready, they went back into the tank again. Now, this time they knew there were crocodiles. So, you know, in a way, you would think that makes it almost worse. In the moment of their greatest fear, they had to go deeper until they found the correct way out. So, to me, this just perfectly illustrates the whole concept of emotional body clearing. If you can allow yourself to have a thorough experience of something that you would otherwise tend to avoid or to resist, what happens is you move through it. In this specific instant, the fears integrate. So that by the end of 12 years of training, these guys were fearless. I mean, nothing bothered them.
If we are divided within, right, where you actually now are feeling that one part of you, you're disassociated from it, it's not part of you, it's not integrated into consciousness, then we have to find the internal adversary. And we know that it is. And it doesn't matter whether you buy into Freud's 3-part schemata, you know, or Jung's 4-part schemata. It's simple. We know that there's a conscious and unconscious self. Many divisions. We have the persona. We even call people, persons. Right? Here's a person. The word just means a facade. You know? Even the very word refers to just a facade. And as I said, if you have disharmony within these modes of being, right, within the anatomy of your own psyche, some people have more, some people have less. If you have these kinds of divisions and this kind of disharmony, you're not only a weaker individual, you're now dependent on all the gimmickry that's going to come in and tell you how to gain it. So instantly you've lost your center. And then one thing leads to yet another and another and another, as you try to get out of the mix, out of the problem. As we said, the door to truth is narrower than you think. We are entrapped in a maze, in a web. And the strange thing about that web is that the more that you try to escape from it, the tighter it becomes. We're strangling ourselves often by our very attempts to be free. Who do you think loves that? Who do you think earns dividends because of our efforts, even spiritually, to liberate ourselves? Who earns points from that? Who is established from that? Do you see what I'm trying to say? That the bottom of the pyramid supports the top.
Before, you were right to keep pressing on Cooper. Turns out he's not as dead as I thought.
I've had some experience with that. And you learn not to judge.
Yes.
Are you okay?
I guess so. Old lovers have a way of opening old wounds. Lovers. Sounds creepy no matter how you say it.
Felicity, I want you to know that whatever experiences you had to go through, I'm glad that you did. They shaped the person you are today. And you know how I feel about her.
I should head out. You were right.
It's okay.
We have to love our families.
We'd be needing an average.
No matter what.
I'll set the bone and take him for an x-ray later. Very good, sir.
I'm very sorry, sir.
Don't worry.
Took quite a fall, didn't we, Master Bruce?
Why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up.
Simplicity of the universal knowledge of the 5 elements, earth, fire, water, air, and the cosmic ether, formed the basis of a global sustenance. Humans still recognize that they're a part of God on earth, and that nothing exists separately from God. They were conscious that if they were a part of the creational spirit which had been materializing for millions of years, they had to possess in themselves dormant but almighty powers waiting to be awakened. In mystery schools, step by step, they learnt to rise to a God-human consciousness. No one prayed to a separate God. They still remembered that they were fallen and incarnated angels who had to attend the school of life and be reborn until mastering and living through any conceivable experience. Until the time came when they would ascend to higher dimensions of consciousness. The Masters of Wisdom knew the secret of the expanding and contracting of the cyclic cosmos. In the Indian Vedic texts, it was described as the inhaling and exhaling of God.
It is ascension into a lower form to create more consciousness, more life expanding. So the universe's consciousness, total potential consciousness of sentience is constantly expanding. The universe stops expanding if there's a retraction of consciousness. It's the total sum of the consciousness of the entire universe that keeps it expanding.
The expansion of the cosmos from the source was called the Omega cycle, since everything diverged from the source. The further the Milky Way and its suns moved away from the source, the weaker their connection to the spiritual source whence everything comes. This means that all life in spiritual decline or descent to lower dimensions slips into the third dimension of the solid material universe. Atlantis and its race were still anchored in the fourth dimension. The Masters of Wisdom knew that at the peak of this civilization, the cosmic cyclic plan had anticipated that the souls would move down into the third dimension in order to totally experience the forgetting of their divine source and to live through the so-called Dark Age. Mankind has always asked where it came from and where it is going. Scientists of all ages have tried to find the origin of life through physical evidence. They have split matter, studied the microcosm and macrocosm, but even so, they only observed life from a certain perspective, adding rows of parallel interpretations of reality. But they overlooked the most important thing of all, the creator of matter, the spirit that lives in all things, the blueprint and information which forms all matter. They see only subjective partial truths because the objective reality is an indefinable state of existence out of which all conceivable partial truths emerge. They will keep splitting life down to the atom, but will not be able to prove the existence of the spirit. The experiment compares with attempting to capture beams of light. Human beings can never catch up with light unless they themselves become light. The same applies to mankind. It will never be able to prove the existence of spirit, but can only become spiritual itself, a process which the initiated call metamorphosis. Until then, even the most splendid achievements and inventions, as well as attempts at explanations of mankind, are an unconscious dream of being still asleep within the development of humanity.
There were two earth fields, not one. So we've got a matter field and an antimatter field. We've got two worlds, one on each side. And we are going from one to the other like a worm, you know, like this. And that's what puts us, our time period goes like this. And it's, you must have those two sides. You know, there was one book that came into my hands, just by pure accident actually. It was a book by Frank Scully. He was a journalist in America. And he wrote this book about I think it was a scientist who gave a lecture at a university. And he said in this lecture that there was not one magnetic field of the Earth, there are two. And they're not exactly the same. The number of lines of force in one field per square centimetre is different to the number of line of force on the other square centimetre. So you've got two fields that are interacting with each other. And when I got this bit of information, well, that changed everything for me. That was when I started really finding things, but I didn't know this. And so I thought, okay, I got the geometric values. Now, if I want this to net in with what I'm doing, I have to change that centimetre measurement into a geodetic square inch. So I did that, and I got the values he gave in that book, and changed them into the two geodetic inch values. Then I found the difference. Now the difference in those two fields gave me that harmonic of 3928371 in harmonics. And then we come back to the grid thing that I found way back in the first place, and I never knew what the 2545 value meant until I found this bit. And I found that 3928371 was a reciprocal of that piece actually knitted into the pole sections of the grid. So the grid is actually tuned to the two earth magnetic fields difference, and everything coming from it is all harmonised. So if Frank Scully hadn't written that book, I wouldn't have anything that I got here now here. I wouldn't have known that there were two fields. And you had to know that to find there was a matter and antimatter and all the cycles knitted together, and the fields are going through each other like a zipper. Imagine the two parts of a zipper through space, and they're working through, and they're interlocking and curling around each other, making an atom. And it's got plus and minus forces, and it's all interlocked with each other. And there are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of these little locking two fields joining and curling in with each other. And we're starting to make a planet. And that gets to the harmonic fullness of that planet. That's the end of that piece. So you go to somewhere else, and it's happening to us. It makes us the same way. Every atom in our body is made from those two waveforms coming together and interlocking and making a human form, making a tree, making everything you see in our reality. But when you think about it, there's nothing there. We are light. Now, it's been said right through history, we are light, we are light. A pyramid means measure of light. I think it's pyramidum, measure of light, or fire within. And all the ancients knew all this stuff. Those pyramids are built to those harmonics. All the measurements, when we've checked them, will give you all these harmonics. And ancient places, Stonehenge, will give you all those harmonics. The people who built those knew all this.
What we're going to do today, the bottom line, we're going to share the science that tells us, number one, that the field is there. Number two, we're going to discover that our bodies and our world are the materialization of that field. From the unreal to the real, from the invisible to the visible, from the probability of quantum possibilities to the reality of our physical world. And number three, we'll find that the language of human emotion, it's a language you already know. Everyone knows this language. We're going to learn how to use this language to speak to this field, the divine matrix, in a way that is meaningful and useful in our lives.
Anyway, I progressed with my work, and I found that I could start looking at other things around the world and using these basic mathematics, and I started calling it harmonic mathematics, because another thing that I'd discovered was that there was a different type of mathematics. It's outside classical mathematics, and I sort of latched onto this. And I found that when I used 1 minute of arc on the Earth's surface, I could then do all these calculations in a harmonic sense. And I was decried by the academics, and they said, oh, you can't use circular measure for distance and everything like that. And I just screwed, and I said, well, we use it every day as pilots. A minute of arc is a nautical mile, so we use it all the time. But anyway, I found that if I took that nautical mile and broke it into 6,000 geodetic inches, or 6,000 geometric feet I should say, then took the 12 inches. Well, I could manipulate the whole of these harmonics in those units. And I found I wasn't getting perfect answers, and I must be, I wonder if there was any time difference. And I finally found that if I used a time base of 27 segments in one revolution of the Earth instead of 24, everything was perfect, and I was getting perfect answers all the time. So I then had all my work in grid geodetic measure and grid time, and from there on my work progressed fairly quickly. I checked ancient places around the world like the pyramids and Stonehenge, and I found that they were sitting on these geometric points, and I could analyse these ancient places in these values and get answers from them. In other words, when those things were built thousands and thousands of years ago, those people knew this secret mathematics, harmonic mathematics. And to this day, even though I've been behind the scenes, I've been offered various things. Nobody will admit this mathematics exists.
The War Galaxy Scouts and the First Invasion Force capture Earth. Earth sentience has no defenses. It doesn't even know what war is. So they're kicked off. Some are kept as captures. The dark guys bring in their initial technological things, refortify Earth on a technological level, and then look at these pyramids and go, we win here. They don't even know how to fight. So they refortified the astral grid and made a second layer of pyramids, and that layer would be to create a barrier between who can incarnate here and who can't.
Okay.
That's what they did. Earth was teleported so that the forces of light that wanted to get their planet back, they knew eventually would get their gear, their stuff in order, teleported into a vacant spot in the universe. Earth was heavily hurt by this teleportation. It was near death, and it gave out a cry to this universe and the 17 other universes out there, and trillions of species responded to that and began the migration pattern to Earth to heal it.
Falling is the first thing I feel. Distant voices echo inside my head. Their orders are clear, and yet all I can think about is the others. Each one traveled the same path. What was their fate? What awaits me on the other side? They have gone to a place where the light is cursed and darkness blinds the soul. This is a place where even angels fear to tread.
The dark guys had about 35, 45 million years equivalent, but Earth's time changes, so it really, you can't equate it.
Mhm.
They had time where nothing was able to invade them and no one knew where they were at. And they were able to mass incarnate troops, train them, technologicalize them, and use the womb chakras of Earth to create DNA systems for warfare.
Ugh.
They then spread out in a rapid succession and captured thousands of planets and made a layer of rings of domination and control, which they were going to move Earth into the center of. And as their domination and control spread, they would move Earth again and again and again and keep advancing the front. Earth was not in a condition to be teleported, but they still went out and started capturing. This is when the people that originally founded Earth said, there it is, we have to get there. And they started following the migration patterns of these energy spirits that were going to heal Earth.
Uh-huh.
And they were able to get in and get back into the system underneath this new grid of incarnation and incarnate within the forces of darkness to create a revolution within inside them. Because that's the same thing the dark forces did when they incarnated back. It's always been to get the breeding patterns of there so that the consciousness of a collective over here can bond with the Earth collectiveness and use Earth for its original purpose.
Mhm.
So Earth was recaptured, but domination and control had been given to tens of thousands of planets by the time they recaptured it. The light recaptured the planet and went to go refortify the energy systems there, and then Earth rejected everyone and said, I need to heal on my own, and then teleported herself into a brand new undisclosed location where both forces started to look for it again.
All right, so then the dark that had been battling and creating this ground and teleporting and doing all this stuff really set the stage for these 15 multidimensional beings to sit back and watch and then wait for their moment to infiltrate.
Mm-hmm.
But they did it through not necessarily through the beings that were there. Now, not all of them incarnated.
Correct.
Okay, so only a portion of these 15-dimensional beings incarnated into the trees, the land, the rocks, what else? The beings that were there?
And eventually the beings that were there.
And interbreeding with them so that they would become soul family.
You got it.
And they'd have the codes to the DNA.
You got it.
And then could start, having
playing the game at their level.
The God game, yes.